Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BS in History! What? Dan, what's on the ceiling?
I don't know. I think it's a ghost.
There's a ghost on Dan's ceiling. Everybody, my name is Nathan, aka Red Grape TV.
And I am Dan, aka Dan Jam Barker.
This is what it says below our screens.
Yeah, you can just look down.
Oh man, and God, you can just look right there. Today is a very, very special episode of BS in History, almost unplanned. Almost didn't happen until we had the bright idea 2 days ago to switch the topics of this podcast for this week. And I didn't.
Well, that's why Nathan changed the background, because that's actually you might think that's the original piece of Da Vinci artwork. That is Alexander Hamilton.
There he is,
just
right
blurred
there,
it a little bit.
right there. I thought about it and I did not have time to go make a new overlay, given that we just made this decision. But, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, because today is an episode of BS in History all about or inspired by the hit Broadway musical Hamilton, an American Musical.
Wow.
Which is its
I haven't seen it. Is it good?
It has a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, if that counts.
Well, is it a movie? I guess I just don't know.
It's just it's a small little global phenomenon. That's all.
Just a small
tiny global phenomenon.
You may not have heard of it. It's called Hamilton.
Yeah.
It's got Lin-Manuel Miranda. You may not have heard of him, although he'll be here later.
He'll be hopping in. We have that amount of sway. We got people in chat saying they're ready. All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Now, if you've not tuned into an episode of BS in History before, and this is your first, which we hope that this is, and we hope that you experience this, we'll put this up on the socials and stuff. So, we're streaming here live on Twitch, twitch.tv/RedGrapeTV. But we do this every other week. BS in History is a podcast all about teaching you things you didn't know happened in history. Maybe.
Or you did, and we're just arrogant and
Right.
assume you don't.
Every week, Dan and I assign each other a topic. This week's topic revolves around Hamilton, which we'll get into in just a moment. We assign each other a topic, and we are tasked with telling the other 3 stories about that piece of history or that category of history. 2 of those stories are interesting stories that we look up online, we read, we learn, we absorb things into our own brains, and then relay them to one another. And one of those stories is a complete and utter BS. Oh man, I have the mirrored mode. BS.
Fabrication.
A lie.
A ruse,
A trick.
if you will.
A trick.
Tomfoolery.
Shenanigans.
Chuck Woolery.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll call it there. Yeah, so we make one of the stories up. It's a creative writing exercise at the same time as it is trying to trick the other into thinking that something really could have happened in history. Now, oftentimes we find that the story that we make up, not near as interesting as the actual historical stories that really did happen. So we get to rely on that to try to trick the other, and then we vote at the end. So if you're in chat today in twitch.tv/RedGrapeTV, we will open the polls after each of us tell our stories, and you will be able to vote for the story that you think is a lie. And we'll see. I'm currently losing this game.
Yeah, badly.
Yeah, very, very badly. I think
You're 2 down.
Oh, and we gotta some notice that your audio's peaking a little bit. I'm gonna try to fix that just a smidge.
Okay, sorry. It might have been me. I did make the mistake of opening your stream in another window.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry.
So we what was I saying? What even was I saying?
History. We're gonna tell 3 stories. One of them's a fabrication.
On you. We could get banned for saying too much Hamilton stuff.
Really?
No, probably not. Now,
Probably.
we did insert a few rules for each other to keep the game fun and keep it moving. Now, chief among them is that the story that we make up is going to be made up start to finish. We're not going to tell you a mostly true story and change a name here or there or just a single detail. We're not going to catch you out on a technicality. We made up something that happened in history, perhaps based on real events that hopefully you know and that would convince you just close enough to the truth to be real. But it's something we made up.
there's gonna be some flavor,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you have to flavor with realism, but the majority, we're talking like 95% of that story, BS.
The event, the way you would read it in a history book, if you read it, it would be untrue. It'd be fake news, if you will.
I will.
You will. There you go.
At least 1 out of 3 times.
So without further ado, oh yeah, we were talking about how I lost, how I'm down
You're
2-1,
losing.
2-0,
Right.
2-0.
Yeah, 2.
3
And
episodes.
you still haven't put the score up, and I think that's because you don't want to see
There's
it.
a reason. There's a reason. Yeah, that must be it. I don't want to be demoralized every time we come in here. Oh my gosh.
Because we did not decide on not putting the score up 2 days ago. We've talked about that for weeks.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We've been meaning to do that. I keep thinking,
Yeah.
if you look at my little piece of software here, I've got a 0-2 up and ready to go. But either way, we're going to get started now telling each other some stories from history. Now, the way that we've broken it down this week, because it's about Alexander Hamilton, and there is a divisive fight happening in the middle of the Hamilton story, of the story of colonial America post-revolution, post-colonialization, post-America, and that's the fight between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. And
or, as Thomas Jefferson would have preferred it, the Democratic Republicans and the anti-Republicans.
Now, hold on a moment. If I'm a Federalist, all that means is that I am for a democratic style of government. I am for a governing body.
Sure, but you're an anti-Republican.
A federal
because you're
body.
not for a republic.
I'm for...
Look, I'm just telling you what Thomas Jefferson wanted, okay? That's all.
If you don't know much about these parties, you're going to learn a lot today about why they came, why they showed up in the first place, and why they disappeared, presumably.
I'd like to say evolved.
Fair. Yeah, that's true. That's true. A lot of the ideals, I guess, are still around. Well, like I say, we kick it off. Last time I went first, so Dan, it is your turn to go first. I will let you
Well,
take it
before
away.
we begin, there is one thing you need to know. There's one additional rule that Nathan did leave out, which is there will be room for one question for each story.
True.
So at the end of each story or at the end of all of it, he will be able to ask me a question to clarify, or if nothing else, trip me up because he thinks it's the lie and he thinks I'm not going to be able to think on my feet. And that's the mistake he keeps making because I'm good at thinking on my feet.
That is true. That's why. Yeah, that's why you keep winning. I am also going to hide chat because I don't want spoilers. So apologies if I'm not chatting with yous in the chat.
We're chatting with you in spirit.
Yeah, that's where I am. Chatting in spirit. All right.
All right. So, if everyone's ready, let's go to my side of the fence, and I will be representing the Southern motherfucking Democratic Republicans. Oh,
Oh.
I did write the O in there.
All right. Good.
So, for anyone who cares about early American history and more importantly, the political system, the Democratic Republicans is the party that is represented by Thomas Jefferson. In fact, he is the founder of this political party. As Nathan will tell you on his side, Hamilton represents the birth of the Federalist Party, and their debates in the cabinet are what shaped what has become our political system as a whole. And ultimately, despite the opinions that we might throw back and forth, there is it's important to note that ultimately these were two very intelligent men who just disagreed on execution and grew to hate each other through their disagreements. So
I mean, it is execution. It's also partially just the philosophy of the role of government in your life, in the life of the citizens, especially around a time where the citizen was, or the nation was largely rural, right? Like, social programs and government oversight was, already, it's still a hotly debated topic. But especially back then.
Back then,
when we were just breaking free from an oppressive
but
regime, we were just breaking
exactly.
We were just breaking out of that.
There was a big fear that the more federal power, the more closely we danced with monarchy again. So yeah, and you know
King
what?
George Washington.
Based on the side of the argument I have to take today, I don't think they're wrong. So you forced me to wear this hat, Nathan. You made me the Democratic Republican. I'll never forget that.
All
right. Here we go. Are you ready for your stories, Nathan? Put your thinking cap on. Story. No, oh, you don't have the hat on. I'll wait. I'll wait.
No, I don't have a hat anywhere nearby to make the joke.
Side note about the hat. I did try to locate the tricorn hat that I had for
Mine's downstairs.
Nathan once had a Hamilton birthday. It's very important to know.
I did.
And yeah, I really wanted to find that tricorn hat, but I think I might have lost it during the move out here.
I wore mine last Friday when we watched Hamilton with my family.
Of course you did.
Yeah, Tammy and I both did.
You big nerd.
I've also got behind me. That's the Hamilton music book, right there, like the sheet music book for piano.
I can't personally see it, but I'm sure that's very impressive.
It's there. It's next to Stardew Valley. So if you like,
I have a Hamilton face mask.
Oh, there you go. If you like Stardew Valley or Hamilton, follow Red Grape TV.
That's it. Those two things, nothing else.
That's it. That's what I'm all about.
Maybe Cuphead because he's got a mug on. So, that was good. We're gonna dive right in. Story number 1, or as I like to call it, the tobacco tariffs, also known as Farmers Refuted.
Okay.
During the presidency of George Washington, both the Federalist and Democratic Republican parties were created, even though neither had Washington on their side. This, of course, famously came from the cabinet debates of Jefferson and Hamilton. During this period, famously, America's first tax was passed on whiskey. Hamilton heeded not the rabble who screamed revolution, but the people did arm themselves and rebel in what is now famously known as the Whiskey Rebellion. But that's a story for another day. Let's instead talk about one of the interesting side effects to that rebellion. After the chaos and bloodshed of the Whiskey Rebellions had ceased, most conversations on taxes and tariffs were tabled as a way to avoid another armed mob marching in. However, an interesting new issue had presented itself in 1793, at the peak of the Whiskey Rebellion, and that was the existence of a new global source of, you guessed it, tobacco. Tobacco, being one of the most uniquely American crops, was a linchpin in the Southern economy. In fact, the reason why France aided us in the Revolutionary War was because we had offered tobacco crops as collateral, which a lot of people don't know. That was our gold. There was not really gold here. Tobacco was our gold.
Okay.
However, the Ottoman Empire in the area now known as Turkey had begun trading their own tobacco at an alarming rate. In order to keep Americans buying American tobacco, Alexander Hamilton and the Federalist Party stood in support of a tobacco tariff, thus making it more difficult to purchase foreign tobacco. Jefferson, as would be expected in his time on the cabinet, opposed this, seeing the absence of a federal hand as critical for maintaining a free market. After all, why should a large nation across the sea regulate the price of tobacco? However,
you're so proud of that. You're an idiot. Okay, all right, good.
I was really proud of that stupid thing.
Okay.
However, fast forward back to 1795, Jefferson was presented with an interesting opportunity. The tobacco tariff that he once sharply opposed was presented to him in a new light. If he were to come out in support, it could be spun that his decision was based on the livelihood of the American yeoman farmer, which was his supporter. But more importantly, it could be spun to his opposition that he and the Democratic Republicans were adopting more of a federalist economic mindset. The Democratic Republicans gained a leg up on the Federalists, and that was achieved by adopting their popular stances and minimizing their significance. However, this story is not about politics as usual, but rather the ripple that it caused that affects us still today. To the actual yeoman farmer, this decision did exactly what Jefferson warned about back in 1793. The federal interference in the free market led to a decline in tobacco sales as a whole, as there was no competitive pricing. It is said in the South at that time that 25% of tobacco farms were either went bankrupt or had to sell off their assets and lands. One of the primary purchasers of these farms was a man named Samuel Morris, a man who had made his fortune on tobacco in Virginia. His wealth was massive, but nearer the end of his life, in 1826, Morris sold off all of his acquired tobacco farms to Andrew Phillip, who had a large holding of existing Turkish tobacco farms. Samuel Morris's family has benefited from this sale ever since, as they are given 20% of all earnings from the Philip Morris Corporation. And that is story number one: the accidental birth of Philip Morris, the people responsible for all the cigarettes that you see now.
Okay, I was gonna say, is Philip Morris a name I should know? And okay,
Yeah, it's Philip Morris. I believe I'm going to look this up. I'm not going to count this as your question. I believe Marlboro is their brand.
so let me just talk it through. So the debatable part to me is that Jefferson would have been pro. I know he gets pro competitive prices, but to be so pro Turkish tobacco while also being such a staunch Southerner,
So maybe I wrote that incorrectly. He was not pro Turkish tobacco. However, he did believe that competitive pricing was what drove
Fair.
the market.
Fair. Which,
So to take away the competition from the American farmer means that essentially the American cost will go higher. That was the idea, which fits into a lot. I mean, that was his same complaint with the whiskey tax.
yeah.
He believed that taxing whiskey from the West was going to ultimately lead to people stop making whiskey, because why bother? What would be the point?
Yeah. Is the Turkish tobacco industry still a thing?
Is that your question?
Yep.
Philip Morris still primarily gets all of their tobacco from Turkey. In fact, I think Turkey is more known for tobacco at this point. I'm speaking as a former smoker. Anybody out there listening, don't smoke. It's not good. But American Spirit cigarettes were American tobacco, and that was one of their big claims. But if you picked up a pack of Camels, for example, that is Turkish cigarettes. I think at this point, most brands either are purely Turkish or at least a blend of Turkish and other places. But also, tobacco is not our cash crop anymore. If anything, right, America's been moving away from tobacco for a while.
Yep. Holds up. It's a really well-written story if it's fake. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Who knows?
I know. Hold on, wait. How many? Just out of curiosity, the oh yes, to our 5 viewers right now. Oh, that story could have been fake if you weren't here for the opening spiel. Dan's gonna tell 3 stories. One of them's made up, but they're all about the Democratic Republicans of early American history, and that could have been a complete lie. But okay.
Could have been.
I need to keep listening.
Could have been.
All right.
All right. Story number 2. Do. This story is called the Missouri Territory, also known as Say No to This.
I thought you just called it "do" and said that's a Hamilton quote.
I wish I had called it "do." Now that I think about it, that would have been so much better.
Okay.
I'm upset. All right. The Missouri Territory. The Democratic Republicans had landed a swift and cruel victory with the election of Thomas Jefferson, a mandate on their party, as the very election of Adams versus Jefferson was an election between the perceived founders of both the Federalist and the Democratic Republican parties.
Hey.
Burr and Jefferson. Oh, sorry.
Hey. Adams did not found. Hey. Adams did not found the Federalist Party. Perceived.
I said perceived for a very important reason, because by that point, Hamilton had been far out of the limelight. So Adams was kind of the figurehead of the party. And also he was president. So,
fair.
He had some clout.
All right.
Maybe lose my place.
Sorry.
Burr and no, you're fine. I thought we were doing the hey.
It turned into
that. Burr and Jefferson demolished Alien and Sedition Adams with ease. By the way, I'm going to make sure to insult Federalist candidates through my stories, seeing as I'm on the Democratic Republican side.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
I did not call Adams hermaphroditic, which was Thomas Jefferson's insult of him, but we'll cover that another time. Jefferson's 2 terms led to an incredible expansion of the U.S. territory with the Louisiana Purchase. Fast forward to 1819. The area now known as Missouri was tired of simply being known as part of the Louisiana Territory, especially now that there was a state named Louisiana. This was the peak of the era of goodwill, which I don't know if you came across that in your research.
No, because 1819, you're talking about I'm Federalists, man. They're
It's
not
not a great
really
time.
they're not really around.
It's not a great time. Yeah, this was the period of time where it was all one party basically controlled the whole government, and just if
Right.
anyone's ever questioned the term "history is written by the victors," they renamed this whole era the era of goodwill. So like, they really knew how to spin
Go them.
their BS. So this was the peak of the era of goodwill, as the Federalist Party had been in decline and the Democratic Republicans controlled a good majority of the power. However, there was trouble in the air and you could smell it. There was one issue that divided even the closest of political allies: slavery. If Missouri were to be a state, would they be a free state or a slave state? A piece of the party, called the Jeffersonian Republicans, believed that the Constitution strictly laid the road to abolition, and that the sin of slavery was to end with the first generation of Americans. However, the Deep South Democratic Republicans felt quite the opposite. The real bombshell came about a month into this endeavor from James Talmadge Jr., who recognized that the Northern Republicans would not have majority enough to stop the South. He added an amendment to the Missouri statehood application, providing that there would be no legal process to continue slavery while not implicitly denying it from existing. The amendment did not pass, as the Senate knew how to say no to this. However, his impassioned speech in the opposition of the expansion of slavery was widely published and circulated as a rally call for abolitionists at the time. This led to a negotiation that was touted as a great victory for the nation at the time: the Missouri Compromise. In this, our Congress agreed to allow Missouri to be a slave state only if Maine was admitted as a free state. Essentially, they weren't directly contingent on each other by the end. However, most people knew that they were linked in spirit.
Okay.
They weren't. They actually originally, when they proposed it, wrote it on one law, and someone out there was just like, "Hey guys, we can't approve two states at a time. Like, separate your work. Let's not."
Right.
No barreling this. Sorry, I lost my place. While the outcome was bleak, the debate pushed slavery back into the spotlight as an issue that needed to be grappled with. And one positive that came was a provision that the rest of the Louisiana Purchase north of Missouri's southern border would be considered free of slavery.
Say that again. Say that part again.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to do the whole last sentence. While the outcome was bleak, the debate pushed slavery back into the spotlight as an issue that needed to be grappled with. And one positive that came was a provision that the rest of the Louisiana Purchase north of Missouri's southern border would be considered free of slavery.
North of Missouri's southern border.
Not including Missouri, obviously. They made sure to put north of Missouri's southern border, not including the areas
state of
listed
Missouri.
as Missouri. Yeah. That actually, and I didn't write this, but that is kind of where you get the early version of the Mason-Dixon line, or at least where they drew it from.
Okay. Defined the compromise of the Missouri Compromise. I think you kind of just did, but just sum it up for me.
Essentially, Missouri wanted to be a state. It was at an era where one party controlled the whole of Congress.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. Majority was had.
Yep.
But because there was a large enough group that thought, well, Missouri needs slaves. It needs to have enslaved people.
Right.
They were met with immediate opposition from their own party at an almost equal level of people saying, absolutely not. The Constitution made it very clear that everyone is free, and we cannot continue having slaves, which ultimately led to a huge rift in the Democratic Republican Party, which is why technically the Federalist Party really did die. The party system we have today is an evolution of that split more than anything.
Yeah. Okay.
So Missouri Compromise was actually what highlighted the rift first and foremost.
Okay. All right, I'm in.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't say the other part, which is the brilliant plan they had to fix Missouri becoming a slave state was, okay, we'll let it be a slave state, if you let us have a free state so that we can balance our voting. That was their brilliant governing.
Got it. Got it.
All right, you ready for story number 3?
I'm ready.
Okay. This is called The Corrupt Bargain, or The Room Where It Happened, Part 2.
Okay. Okay. The Corrupt Bargain. Okay, cool. Got it.
The election of 1824. Can we get back to presidential politics? I thought you would enjoy that one.
I mean, of course I do. You know I enjoy every single pun you've made. I didn't write any puns into my stories, but I think you'll enjoy. I think you'll enjoy my story titles.
I was happy with my puns. I love my puns.
All right. Okay.
All right. The era of goodwill came to a close in a big way. Before this, the 2-term legacy of Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe created an almost unified singular political party. While individuals disagreed, still, most decisions were met with the semblance of harmony. That is, until the election of 1824. 4 Democratic Republicans ran for president that year. House Speaker Henry Clay, newly appointed Tennessee Senator Andrew Jackson, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, and Secretary of Treasury William H. Crawford. To the general public, this was a race between Adams and Clay, both notable figures for many reasons, but mainly because of their influence and reach. So, for example, obviously, John Quincy Adams had the background of, well, his father is a founding father. That's huge.
Yep.
But also, he was a noted diplomat and then a very, very well-loved Secretary of State. Clay, as the Speaker of the House, basically was responsible for a lot of the big landmark decisions around Louisiana Territory, around statehood, around... I think, if I'm not mistaken, Clay served under Madison and Monroe, so he had just been a name that everyone knew. He was just always there. Obviously, Jackson, very popular, but in his own niche way. But yeah, it was really a race in the public eye between Adams and Clay. When the votes were counted, however, no candidate was able to gain the majority of the Electoral College. But in a huge upset, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote. He was a war hero. It makes sense. Clay, once thought to be a second-place contender, found himself at the lowest tally and was removed from the tie-breaking vote. It came down to our country's second House of Representative electoral decision. For those of you who are familiar with the musical Hamilton, you will remember the election of 1800, which was decided by the House of Representatives once Hamilton threw his support to Thomas Jefferson. So just as a note, this is the second time this happened. Had Clay been permitted to run, he may have won then and there, as his pull within the House was notable. Remember, he was the Speaker of the House during the era of goodwill. That is why it is all the more notable that John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay found a compromise in a private meeting that no one can even can truly confirm happened. Clay emerged as a vocal advocate for the son of a Federalist. Clay's support pushed Adams into the presidency until the next term, where Jackson got his revenge. Adams truly got more than he gave, and he wanted what he got. When Clay was then appointed as Secretary of State, Andrew Jackson left D.C. and claimed that the election was at the fault of an entrenched government with co-conspirators. He dubbed this the corrupt bargain, which we can never confirm because no one else was in the room where it happened. Mm-hmm. Also, side note about Jackson, he not only left D.C., he also stopped being a senator because he was so upset and dedicated the next 4 years of his life to running for president, just to shove it in John Quincy Adams' face.
Okay.
And that is story number 3.
Okay. All right. Was John Quincy Adams ever president?
John Quincy Adams was president, which I had literally said in that story. He won because of his deal with
Wait.
Clay.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. Clarify something for me.
Sure.
Andrew Jackson wins the popular vote. We're talking about different years?
No, he won the popular vote, but he did not get the Electoral College.
Right. Okay. All right.
The Electoral College was
sorry.
a tie.
I'm asking a wrong line of questioning, but that still clarifies. When was Andrew Jackson president was the question. Should have been the question.
4 years later.
Got it. Okay. All right.
He won the next election handily.
Okay.
Which not that bad for John Quincy Adams, because he then resumed he was then part of the House of Representatives again, which he actually said he preferred to the presidency.
Okay. All right. I'm benefiting here from some incredibly recent research that I did. Not weeks ago, but recent enough. Into times the presidency has been lost, but the popular vote has been won. Which has only happened like 5 times, maybe it was 4. It doesn't happen very often, which is, well, that could be a little drastic, but it hasn't happened very often at all compared to how many times it has happened in the last 20 years, and especially in the last 4. So, I was researching because I was curious: is losing the popular vote but winning the presidency common, as happened 4 years ago? And I determined through research it was not common. That was really the
Not
only
common.
Not common. The only answer I was after, though, was that. The other answers that I remember in my brain thinking was that Andrew Jackson was on that list. And I asked the line of questioning wrong because I was thinking about it as people who won the presidency but lost the popular vote. But I was researching the other way. I remember him saying he won the popular vote is what I think I remember seeing.
Well, what I'll say, also keep in mind, this was one of how many elections can you think of where it was 4 candidates running for president?
Totally true. Totally true. But I think I remember that crucial fact of that story being real. Now, I don't want to share too much. You know what? I'm sharing too much because here's the thing. We've got your 3 stories out there in the world. We've got tobacco. We've got the your second story was Missouri Compromise, and then the election of 1820 some or other
24, or you can just call it Farmers Refuted, Say No to This, or The Room Where It Happens Part 2.
So we've got all those. So let's go ahead and open a quick poll really quickly. We've got a poll going. You're able to participate by typing into chat which story you think is true or a lie. I actually already have my decision, so I'm going to go ahead. It is not changing. Yes, so here we go. All right, sorry, I just opened chat again, and I'm seeing everybody. Hello, welcome to the show. All right.
Hi, everybody. So I also wasn't looking at chat because I was reading. But hello,
the poll is
everybody.
open. You can type !vote space story 1, story 2, story 3, and make a vote for the story that you think is a lie. Oh, we're getting okay. All right, we've got a vote here. So here's my thinking. I'll talk through it while the audience votes. I don't think story number 3 is a lie because I think that it's too crucial a fact for you to have made up, and I believe myself to know that fact to be true. What I mean is I think that's too big an element of that story for you to have slid that in there as some flavor, some historical truth, right, in your fake story. I don't think you would have done that. Story number 2, the Missouri Compromise. From what I remember about the Missouri Compromise, I mean, you would have made up the Missouri Compromise, from my understanding, if your story number 2 was a lie. That's my thought.
Or altered everything in it.
Right, which I should be relying more on my AP US history and junior year of high school more. But I really think I remember the things that you said about the Missouri Compromise. And I also don't think that you would have relied that heavily on me not knowing something as big as the Missouri Compromise. I think you would have assumed I'll stay out of that territory on the in case. Or I'll tell a story he doesn't know about it, but it's true. So, we've got some votes in really quickly. We've got, all right, very good, very good. Let's go ahead. We're going to close polls here in just a few seconds. We've got perfect. Mathis voted. Thank you, Mathis. Welcome.
Hi, Mathis.
Hey, Mathis. Okay. All right, we have 2 votes for story number 1, a vote for story number 2, and a vote for story number 3. 50% of the audience thinks that story number 1 is a lie, which is in sync with my thought that story number 1, I believe about tobacco and Turkish tobacco to be a lie. And I'm really afraid because there's a lot of context you provided, and now thinking back, like you talk about how Turkish tobacco is a really big industry, and now if I'm wrong about that, I think story number 1 is the lie. I think it's the lie. I think it's the lie. Done.
Oh, Nathan.
No.
I'm so happy.
No.
I'm so happy.
Why?
Because, Nathan, you see, now you get to put a 1 under your
I'm
name
on the
because
board.
you got it.
I'm on the board.
You got it. You guessed right. You did it.
Oh my god. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy. Oh wait. Cisco said always. Oh yeah. You win 33% of the time you play this game. Is true. You do win 33%.
Oh wow. Yeah. Technically, good point.
If it is completely random, hey, that means that we got from Tabby was right and Mathis was right. Perfect. And Mathis said he followed Tabitha.
Who said story number 3 was a lie? I can't read the chat from here. Who said
Francisco.
Francisco. I understand missing a lot of the little stuff in the middle, but come on, presidential elections, you gotta know that. That's the big.
I mean, again, I only knew that Jackson won the popular vote, but not the presidency because of very recent research into things that are currently relevant in 2020. You know.
Sure.
But yeah, Cisco says, "Damn, Tabitha's a genius." Yep.
She actually, I'm not gonna lie, I think she gets it right.
She gets it right
most
of
the time.
She absolutely does. Oh my gosh! And so, tell me about tobacco.
What? Tell you about it?
Tell me about why that was. Tell me about like what you know about the actuality of the situation.
Oh, I made the whole thing up. None of that.
Does Turkey export tobacco?
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
That was added for flavor because I knew Turkey was a major competitor to American tobacco industries.
Okay.
But I don't think that was until the middle of the 1800s.
Got it.
So that wasn't it. No, I read about the whiskey rebellions, and then I was like, I want to make up my own whiskey rebellion. That was literally that is as far as, and I was also very excited to name it Farmers Refuted.
Right. Oh my God. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the stories about the Democratic Republicans. I hope you learned something. The Democratic Republicans. I hope you learned something. Get that information about tobacco out of your head. Now, Nickety Nick X, by the way, thank you very much for the follow. And we just said in chat, I didn't know Turkey exported tobacco or enjoyed tobacco, but then again, who doesn't? Fair.
Yeah, good point.
Awesome. And thank you for the follow mid that. Welcome to intermission really quickly where we're doing our podcast. We're about to go on a super quick break. And, talking 60 seconds. Watch this here ad. And then we'll be right back with more stories about.
What if it's an ad for Hamilton on Disney Plus?
Listen, if Twitch is that good, somebody tell me what the ad is for. There could be various. Oh, we need to turn off the poll. I'm going to do that in the intermission. 60-second ad. Everybody type what ad you get because I'm running an informal poll and I really want to know. Here we go. All right. See you in 60 seconds. All right. Liars. That is not what's happening in the ad space right now. You are all awful. Oh, all right.
No, it is.
USAA, Geico, US Navy, Best Buy, Hannah Season 2, says my father. And then Chex Quest, which I have heard I get Chex ads. Which I'm quite proud of. Do I have my... Oh, we took it away. I've got all the Chex merch that Chex sent me. It's my claim to fame. Chex mailed me stuff after I streamed Chex Quest. It's the only thing that I can rely on. Oh,
could you potentially play that 7-Up game for the SNES and see if they'll just send you some 7-Up swag?
I could be Cool Spot. That was that.
Cool Spot.
Cool Spot. Yes, 100%. I know the game. Oh my gosh. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to learn a little bit more. We're back for our Hamilton-themed BS in history, where we're playing Two Truths and a Lie, but with historical stories. Oh, Tabby said she got Chex Quest when she first signed on as well. I love that I get Chex ads. I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, I just keep getting Fleshlight. That's so weird.
So I wrote stories about Federalists. Now, the Federalist Party, let's just do a little preamble, though, really quickly. So the Federalist Party, not around for very long. Ultimately, a response to a new nation that needed new systems, right? And to this day, of course, we debate the role of government in our daily life. But when there's no government, as there really wasn't when we first started, you need people who have that understanding of we need large financial systems, we need large federal industries or agencies that are going to oversee the government. And so that's, I feel like, and we'll learn through this, why they were very popular right up front, and then it was pretty much a steady decline with a few little bumps that we'll talk about. So we're going to get into it. Now, I also named my stories after Hamilton quotes, but I messed with the Hamilton quotes. They themselves are just twisted just a little bit. And so let's get started with a story I call...
But no puns. I can't believe you didn't do puns.
I didn't do puns throughout.
That seems like your thing.
You're 100% right. We're going to get started, though, with a story called Hamilton Wrote the Other 50.
Ooh.
Uh-huh. I was happy when I came across this. All right. So, the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers are an interesting thing because the Federalist Papers, honestly, and in all rights, really don't have very much to do with the Federalist Party. So let's just say that right out of the way. I'm doing the Federalist Party, but the Federalist Papers were, of course, the foundation of our nation. They have that title, and so I felt comfortable including them in here. And the Federalist Papers are an interesting thing. So firstly, the interesting thing about the Federalist Papers is they were all written between 1787 and 1788. And in total, as told in the musical, there are 85 essays written in what we now colloquially refer to as the Federalist Papers. As referenced in Nonstop in the musical Hamilton. Get the hell off chat. As referred to in the musical Hamilton in the song Nonstop, I'll just quote it. Here's a refresher. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51. Powerful line in the song Nonstop. Oh, all right. So now most of those essays were written by a single author, but it is the case that not all of them were written by a single individual. And the authorship of those documents was actually not told to the American public around their publication. So as those essays were coming out into the public knowledge, the authorship wasn't being completely disclosed, instead choosing to include the authors' names of all the collaborators on the documentation as authorship of the documents. So John Jay was hardly involved because he actually did really bow out after 5. But for the most part, Hamilton and James Madison are listed on a lot of the documentation. So the authorship is slightly in debate. Multiple of the men's names have appeared in authorship on multiple papers is what's written. So how do we know who wrote what? Basically, Madison and Jay wound up telling everybody. Because in 1808, Madison published the 29 essays that were claimed to have been written under Madison in a single volume that was just titled The Federalist. Now, they were never known as the Federalist Papers. They were just titled Federalist 1, Federalist 2, Federalist 3 on the top of the papers. So you never had the Federalist Papers, but there was this volume called The Federalist, which is 29 essays that James Madison says that were basically his contribution to the documents. So in reviewing the papers, however, in reviewing the papers on which Hamilton and Madison's name appear, there is a paper that is widely considered to include large contribution from Madison, as it contained writing that nearly verbatim quotes Madison's writing from the Virginia Plan at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. So, Virginia Plan 1787 was really the beginning of the Constitutional Convention. It was the start of where we would identify. It called for 3 branches of government. It called for a bicameral Congress appointed by population. These are all things that Madison wrote, and they're in a essay that he claimed not to have written essentially as part of the Federalist Papers, but instead is attributed to Hamilton. The writing is effectively verbatim from what he wrote in the Virginia Plan. And it may be the case that Hamilton wrote this essay alone and credited Madison on the paper because of the lifted language, but in the end, we just don't know. So that is a story about how I think that the line in Nonstop could be misconstrued and could actually be wrong.
Okay. All right. Here, I don't know if I have a direct question yet. I'm going to kind of throw my question away on this one.
Okay.
Only because I feel like I grasped what you're putting down there, and it seems plausible, but let's not go through all that yet.
There's, okay, go for
it. We'll go through the thought process later. The essay in contention.
Yeah.
I guess so. My thought is Lin-Manuel Miranda clearly was not alone in researching for the musical,
sure.
Right? He had oh my God, who wrote the book on Hamilton?
Ron Chernow. Now, to be fair, this essay is widely considered to have been written by Alexander Hamilton. It's attributed to Alexander Hamilton if you go look up the essays that were written by the group of men. The point that came up in research is that not all essays were written by a single person, and that some of them are misattributed.
This is a Lennon-McCartney situation where you're never really sure
effectively
who wrote what.
Effectively, the essay is essay 29. I had that written as additional information. So it's Federalist number 29. It's called Concerning the Militia.
Okay, so then I think my question is, can you read essay 29 right now in its entirety so I can try to pick out the language? No, I'm kidding. Don't do this.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'll find Federalist 29. The Federalist that was released by James Madison was released just prior to his first election run, right? Right as so already there was a little bit of dissent in the Democratic Republican Party for the Embargo Act of 1807, right? Which Thomas Jefferson was spearheading along with James Madison, and there was some dissent over that. So it argued effectively against his election, which would happen in 1808. So there's a possibility he didn't release it in the papers that he claimed to have written in case that it would exacerbate existing tensions over policy that he promoted in Jefferson's term.
Sure, and
right?
as I said in mine, the reason the Democratic Republicans ultimately survived and thrived was because they learned how to pick and choose from the Federalist Party while leaving behind what made them look bad. So I get that.
So in part it could have been because it could have just been a political. It could have been Hamilton saying, no one knows. It could have been Hamilton saying, I'm just going to credit Madison on this because I wrote it, but I included language that he effectively wrote once upon a time. It could have been Madison specifically leaving out documentation that he thought would make him look bad prior to an election push.
Got it. All right. No further questions. Sorry. I feel like that was a lot, but I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
Fair enough. All right. Story number 2 is called Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Party to Keep Existing After You've Been Shot? So, that's what the name of it is. So, Federalists.
Well done.
Okay.
Good name.
Okay, good.
Good name.
So this is more of a story of kind of the decline of the Federalist Party. Because we know, as mentioned, even in your stories, the Federalist Party does not exist for very long. So, Federalists were, not very popular, right? So, from the very beginning, they pretty much were all about nationalist programs and power as opposed to states' power. It's also important to note, I already wrote this. I'm sorry. So, along with the Federalist Papers, I have written here is it's important to note part of the story, just an interesting fact that the Federalist Papers, the word has very little to do with the Federalist Party as it would come to be known. The papers were written in 1787-88, and the party didn't really roll around. The Federalist Party, as it was titled, didn't really roll around until there was sort of a growing divide happening in Washington's cabinet as a part of his first term. So this is really where Federalists began, right? Is the early 1790s, Washington's first term, a divide happens in his cabinet between Jefferson and Hamilton, as you already described. And this is where we get the term Federalist as it relates to a political party. But anyways, so Federalists were all about establishing national power, which was really good and important for the founding of a brand new country where political and financial systems needed to be created. But once they were created, the country was reminded that most of its citizens were grassroots farmers and such. So after John Adams' term in 1801, the party started to fade, and then Homeboy went and got himself shot in 1804, and the party disappeared. That's how I have this written.
Ta-da!
Or did it? No, it didn't disappear right then, actually. So after Hamilton's death, the key leaders in the Federalist Party were effectively gone. We have John Adams kind of out of the picture, Hamilton out of the picture. But Federalists went for kind of a last-ditch effort to be relevant in the states where they kind of knew that they were most popular and had potential sway, i.e. the North, which is pretty much the only part
New York.
Yeah, it was everywhere in New England except Vermont, which I find very funny. But
That is very funny.
everywhere but Vermont was all in on Federalists. And then there was I don't remember the states, but there were one or two states that carried a large Federalist vote in the next presidential election. They opposed some of Jefferson's biggest agendas, and with that, they won enough populace that they took a hefty bulk of the votes in the 1808 election. But Madison still won. So they didn't have enough to win there. And then they shot themselves in the foot. So really here is where the Federalist Party begins to immediately decline. So the Federalist Party was always very pro-Britain. And very even as is referenced in the musical, in what is it? Cabinet Battle number 2, that the Federalists supported not supporting France in the war, right?
Correct.
And so then when
Alien and Sedition Adams.
Right. And so when the War of 1812 rolls around and Jefferson effectively declares war against Britain, the Federalists, or not Jefferson at that point, well, he was involved in it, right? Either way. Or was that Madison? Doesn't matter. War of 1812.
I think when he retired, he retired.
Yeah. So Madison was president in 1812 when the War of 1812 started against Britain. Federalists took a back seat to the conversation at that point, effectively being enough pro-Britain in that situation or against the war enough that they garnered themselves a perception of being treasonous. And so because of the Federalists just overall being so pro-Britain that people were dude, that's treasonous. After war, they retained some of their local influence into the 1820s, and then like Hamilton before it, they disappeared. So that is why after the Federalist Party begins to decline steadily as Adams gets voted out of office. And then there's these little moments where the Federalists are like, but ha ha ha, but remember that Jefferson did this and that was bad. And people were like, well, okay, yeah, I guess so. And they got some votes.
Yeah.
Huh. And then the War of 1812, and they were like, remember that we love Britain. And people were like, well, no, that's against our country.
We don't like that.
We don't like that. And so the Federalist Party effectively disappears. That is the all over the place story of number 2, which is really the entirety of how the Federalist Party disappears. It's pretty much it. There's really not that much hanging on by a thread that they do. They tried. Any questions?
And I tried. Yes. With the dismissal of Hamilton from the cabinet to begin with, I would actually say that was probably the real beginning of the decline, even before his death. I think the election of John Adams personally is the real nail in the coffin when he lost to Jefferson.
Sure.
Who emerged as the Federalist talking head at that time? Who was the big Federalist?
That's the thing is there wasn't one. There were 3. There was Charles Pinckney, probably, who ran against
He
Madison.
was one of Hamilton's spies.
Is that true?
That's from the John Adams HBO show. John Adams believes Pinckney to be a spy for Hamilton once Hamilton's out of the cabinet.
Wow, yep. I don't remember that. And then there was DeWitt Clinton, and then there was one more who had a funny name. It was like Governor something.
His name was Governor?
His name was Governor.
Wow.
Hold on, wait 1 second.
You can only get one job with that name.
Hold on. His name was
Governor.
Oh, there was also Timothy Pickering. And then I don't know how to find this dude whose name was Governor, but I will find it later and send it to you. But I thought that was interesting. Essentially, there was no big voice. There were people that they rallied behind in later elections. So that's pretty much all there was. There was after like Pinckney was being touted as the next Federalist candidate, everybody kind of rallied around him. But there was no idea. Here's the issue: the Federalist Party didn't have an ideological philosophy after Hamilton's death. They couldn't tack themselves onto any single cohesive belief. All they could do was combat individual policy happening on the other side, which is what led them just enough to get votes, but not enough to stick around as a party to this day, right? Because they didn't stand.
They were on the defensive.
Exactly. Ironically, after Hamilton, where we hear about Hamilton being the one who has the opinions, right? And being definitive and believing in stuff, the Federalists didn't really believe in anything other than certain amounts of government oversight. So there wasn't a big Federalist, which I think really is the problem. If you have a person to rally behind in a name, then that person can lead your party, and the party didn't have leaders.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Okay.
My last story is called Pick Up a Pen, Start Spinning.
What?
Not spinning around, but like spinning, like welcome to the spin zone. You know, like spinning words, spinning ideas, spinning.
Oh, we're not just spinning pens.
No,
in our
we're
hands?
not pick up a pen, start spinning. No. Pick up a pen, start spinning your words and convincing.
Got it.
All right.
Got
it's
it.
supposed to feel shady. All right.
Mine was shady on the third story too.
Oh crap! You're right. All right, during Washington's first term, he stayed largely above the partisan spectrum, with a cabinet full of opinionated individuals looking to secure policy that best suited them. However, by the end of his first term, he was largely represented by a Federalist executive branch, and his policies followed suit. So by the end of Washington's presidency, while he kind of stayed above the bickering that was happening in his cabinet, he is identified as effectively a Federalist leader in his time. So it stands to reason that if you dig into Washington's farewell address, you're going to find a little bit more of a political agenda than you might want to think. Okay. Which, of course, we know was written mostly by Alexander Hamilton, who was himself a Federalist. So you're going to find sort of political language if you really dig into the farewell address. And so we found some interesting things looking through the farewell address that I wanted to run by you. So, for example, he warned that against the influence of foreign powers, causing the United States to steer clear of permanent alliances that might not serve its interest. In effect, this strict neutrality stance amounted to an anti-French position, as it contradicted an earlier treaty of mutual support between the United States and France. This was largely due to the Federalists' increasingly pro-British agenda, as evidenced by the Washington signing of the Treaty of Goodwill between America and Britain earlier in his second term. His remarks on religion parallel one of key attacks of the Federalists on the Democratic Republicans, that they were deists, like the dreaded French revolutionaries, or at least no friends of traditional religion. James Madison had actually written an earlier version of Washington's farewell address. Washington considered stepping down from his position as president after a single term, and James Madison wrote the first edition of Washington's farewell address, which did not include any of this what would grow on to be strictly Federalist language. And it included no mention of religion at all in the first version of the farewell address written by James Madison. Of course, Washington added his own spin to the document to procure his legacy. He warned against political factionalism, which is, by many historians, considered to be an attempt at solidifying his legacy as being above faction or party. But in the end, Washington's farewell address is considered to be, ultimately, a statement of Federalist agenda. And that is story number 3. Story number 3.
This is just because it slipped my mind. So obviously, Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury. This is my question. Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury. Jefferson was Secretary of State until the end there. What was Madison on the cabinet?
Hold on. Whoops. Whoa. No, I just want James Madison. The answer to your question is that James Madison was... nothing in the cabinet. He was nothing. He was a member of the House of Representatives.
So interesting that he was just tapped to write speeches.
When Washington's first term would have been ending, he was a member of the House of Representatives from Virginia's 5th District. Or 15th District at that time.
What about the end of Washington's second term, which is what I'm referring to?
Well, he didn't write a speech at the end of Washington's second term. That's when he actually stepped down. But same deal. He was still a member of the 15th District. He stepped out. Okay, so just looking at Wikipedia, James Madison steps out as a member of the House of Representatives. He steps down in 1979. He's nothing until he is the 5th Secretary of State in 1801 under Jefferson. So there's
okay.
5 years.
So he was almost like just a key political advisor as a person.
Yes. But my story maintains that Madison wrote a farewell address for Washington at the end of his first term.
Yes, no, I understood
early
that.
1790s.
What I was clarifying was because it may have been at the end of the first term, and maybe he was then given a cabinet position in the second.
Got it. Got it.
As in, like, oh, there's a reason why Washington tapped him. Like, here he is.
Right.
Your new Secretary of HUD. I don't know. Was there HUD at that point?
That's your question, Dan. I'm going to go ahead. Tabby says this one's hard. We're going to go ahead and open the poll. Let's go ahead and start this bad boy. And the poll is open. I'm going to let Dan do some thinking out loud.
So, Nathan, I need to start by saying I'm incredibly proud of you for these stories.
Yes.
And here's why.
I'm looking
You
for
did
your
the exceptional... You did the exceptionally hard task of writing stories that are so simple that all of them could be true. Every single one of those could be true. Because realistically, why would you lie about it? It's a small thing. It's such a small thing. Yeah. Why would anyone lie about this? So let's break them down. So first, if story 3 is a lie, it is only in that Madison had a hand in writing the speech, right? Like that would be like the big factor of it, because everything else that you stated was absolutely something I already kind of knew about. So in that regard, I feel like story 3 has to be true.
Okay.
Story 2. Remind me, what was story 1 one more time, just a synopsis?
Story 1 was that the Federalist Papers were written by a sort of ambiguous list of authors.
That's right.
And so they were claimed at a later date.
And then story 2 was about the fall of the Federalist Party, or rather how they tried to survive and ultimately failed. I don't know enough about the Federalist Papers. To be honest, I don't know enough about the Federalist Papers to know whether or not there was one that could have been written by either man and is contested. But that also seems fair based on how they were written in general. It was a group effort. I am gonna have to go oof, I may regret this. I think story. You know what? Gut's telling me story number 1 is a lie.
Okay.
Story number 1 is an absolute lie.
So, okay, we just hit 4 votes. The audience is split 50-50 between story number 1 and story number 2.
Watch, guys. It's going to be story number 3, and he's going to make us all look like jerks. This is what's going to happen.
I will tell you that story number 3 is true.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I needed that.
You're welcome. The lie is...
Oh, no. You're too proud of yourself.
Story number 1. God damn it. How do you keep doing this? Ugh.
Oh my God. Ooh, that was...
All right, let's talk here for a second. So here's the reality of the Federalist Papers. You ready? They were all written between 1787 and 88. And no one knew the authorship of those papers when they came out. It was purposefully kept anonymous. They were also...
That I knew.
Yes. Oh, Tabby and Francisco... wait, who got it? Oh, no, Tabby got it and Mathis got it because Mathis followed Tabitha. They were also released as a single tome or volume called The Federalist. That happened back in 1788. So they were released that way. No authorship was stated. And then how was the authorship later? Basically, it was then later... attributed. There's a single author for every single story. It was true that most of them were written by a single individual. No single paper is in contention about whether it had 2 major collaborators. There was collaboration in terms of discussion, but the authors of each individual one were later revealed individually to have been written by a single person each. So the numbers listed in Nonstop are exactly legitimate. There is not a paper that is in contention. Now, number 29 is about concerning the militia. That is paper number 29. It was credited, or is credited, and was written by Alexander Hamilton.
See, and you know what? Here's what did you in. Here was the logic that made me go with 1.
Okay.
Every man involved with those Federalist Papers had far too big of an ego not to make it very clear at some point in their life.
I was going to say, at some point in their life, I do think the authorship didn't come out until after Hamilton was dead. I think that's true. I'm not. That's not part of anything. I don't follow that story. But yeah, they didn't say who wrote those papers at first. It was very much a secret for a long while. But you're right. They wanted to stamp their name on it. That is true. There was a lot of Federalist language in Washington's farewell address, pretty much all written by Hamilton. Washington puts his own stuff in there. The part, like, people do kind of think that he was kind of just trying to put himself above on a pedestal, kind of out of the way of parties. And so he was talking very neutral, which is fine. And then, yeah, the Federalist parties just blew up. Like they just kind of sucked after a while.
I'm telling you, once John Adams lost, that was it. There was no Federalist. Who are you going to attach to?
Oh my gosh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for playing along. I know, 3-1. At least there's a 1 on the board now, so you still only have a 2 lead, which I'm happy with. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for playing along. Every other Wednesday, we do a BS in history where we tell each other 3 stories. One of them is a lie from history. We've assigned each other topics for 2 weeks from now, which I think we're going to change a little bit pretty soon, the way that we assign topics. But for right now, we're just pulling things out of a hat and then seeing what sticks. Which, Dan, in 2 weeks, I think I said I wanted to hear stories about naval exploration.
Yeah, you wanted naval exploration, and I think I wanted to hear about the different Hollywoods from around the world.
I'm too curious about those stories to say we're not going to do that. We're going to do that. I need to know about the different Hollywoods of the world.
No, we're going to do it.
If you join us in 2 weeks, we'll have BS in History Command and Conquer, which is a naval movie.
Command and Conquer Wood.
What? Yeah, right. Command and Conquer Wood. Oh my gosh. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining. We will see you in 2 weeks. Have yourselves a wonderful time. Have a good night. Bye.